Okay, hi guys. It's nice to be here.
Hello.
And to have all of you here. It's summer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, everybody's saying my name is Charmaine. It's true, and my last name is Roy, and I've been living in Rexdale for 31 years now.
Wow.
Yeah. So I came to Rexdale under very hard circumstances. I grew up in Jamaica. I came here when I was 12 years old when Pierre Trudeau was the prime minister, so it was easier to get access to Canada. And I was exactly 12 years old. And when I came to Canada, when I was on that plane and I landed in Canada, I felt immediately it was my home. And I thought, wow, that's strange. I'm from Jamaica, but I felt immediately that I belonged here. And even as a child, I thought that was a very interesting feeling to have. So when we first came to Canada, I was living in Richmond Hill. I didn't live there for too long. I went to school there for a year. That was fun, and it came in the middle of winter too. And that was really interesting to walk in snow and see snow and feel snow. And my mom and my sisters, and we lived in Richmond Hill in an apartment building. And about a year and a half later, we moved to Newmarket. My parents, they bought a house there. So I went to school there. And coming from Richmond Hill to Newmarket, we were the only black people. And I was the only black in my school. That was an unusual experience, you know. When I first went to school, everybody was so curious about me. And, you know, they wanted to pinch me, feel me, see if I was real, you know. And then then I got into the classrooms, and that was a different experience than in Jamaica. Because I guess people were surprised that I was so knowledgeable then, because in Jamaica, you had to learn your 3 R's, and then you started at a very young age, so I could read and write and do all that stuff from I was very small. So it was a very different system. And then when I came here, I was like, I know the answer. And I always knew that. I never think that on they start calling me a brown noser. I had no idea what that was. I had no clue. I was always like, oh, I know the answer. And then everybody's like start mumbling and whispering, and I'm like, what's going on? Because in Jamaica you could go, I know the answer, you know? So it was a natural thing with me. And after a while, people stopped talking to me, you know, you think you know everything. And I'm like, but I do, you know. And that's my personality. I kind of like to show off that I know stuff, right? But that didn't work over too well. So I kind of started, you know, getting more quiet and focus on my work and did my work. I always studied, I always read, I emphasize reading. I'm a bookworm. But that's the way I am. So after a while, I started getting into, you know, hanging out with girls that were popular, and, you know, but they got into trouble. And I started getting into trouble, and I started having wars with my mom, and she didn't like some of the company I was keeping, and I became very rebellious and defiant towards her, you know, this is Canada, you can't do anything to me, that kind of mentality. But my mom showed me differently. She's like, well, if you don't like it here, you can leave. So that's what I did. I got a job, saved my money, and I left. And I never went back because I thought I knew everything, right? But guys, no, I had no idea what I was getting into. I have been through the ringer. I have been through things that I never thought I would experience. Coming from the background that I came from, with my grandparents that helped raise us, they were very religious. We were very prominent in our church, in our community. So I would define us as upper middle class in Jamaica, because we had maids, we had people who took care of us, and My grandparents had a big business in Jamaica, so they were very well known. My grandmother was a very prominent person in the community within the church. So I was raised that way. So when I reached 15, 16 now, I kind of rebelled and forgot all the good stuff that I was taught, because when you're a teenager, you think you know everything, but you don't. You don't know, and you don't know what kind of people that you're going to get involved with, because everybody has a face and everybody has an agenda. But you don't know, because of my naivety, I did stuff, some of the stuff I don't even remember, but I know I did it, right? And that took me down a really dark place. It took me down to a dark place that I never thought that I would be able to pull myself out of. I have had a lot of help through social services, through pastors, from anybody that could counsel me to bring me back on a clear path. And I would always regress. And that's what we do as human beings. We start out straight and narrow, and then something pulls you back. Other friends, loneliness. Loneliness is the greatest disease. I think that it is, because you get lonely and you get isolated, and somebody comes and friends you up, and then you're like, oh, I have a new friend, only to realize, oh, this person could be my worst enemy, right? But you don't know until you know. So having gone through all that stuff as a teenager, then I go into my 20s. I met my son's father. I was very young, and he was really nice to me in the beginning, and he knew that I came from a very bad place. He was French Canadian Indian. He was Métis. So we had a lot in common because of our backgrounds, the kind of lifestyle that we had. His was not so great either, from the streets. He's done some petty things and all of that stuff, right? So we got together. I'm the one that actually chased him, and I got him. Just something about him just triggered something inside of me. I got a little excited, and I went after and I go, oh, I want that boy, and I got that boy. And I lived with him for a long time. We were really happy. He took me all over Canada, and he showed me, and I even learned a little bit of French. And then I met his whole family, and we traveled, and especially on the train rides, they're my favorite. And he showed me stuff that I never experienced before, and it was exciting. I was in my 20s, I was living free. I thought I was free. So anyways, I remember we went to Newfoundland, North Bay, all those places, and I love those places. I got a taste of how we can be in one country with so much different culture and so many different belief system and how people live, was so exciting for me. And my favorite place was Newfoundland. And I would go, and I enjoyed it there because it reminded me of Jamaica. It's one of my favorite places in Canada. So my son's father, he took me to all those places, and I spent time there. I'm not talking about 2-3 days, like a month, 2 months, 3 months. And I enjoyed it. And then whenever we traveled back to Toronto, this was all during the summer times and stuff. And when we traveled back, we lived together, and then I found out that I was pregnant. And then there was a lot of changes in my life at that point. Things started to change really fast. I started noticing things that I wasn't happy with myself. In our relationship, it wasn't very good, right? Things started taking, and I think it was the pregnancy too. And the fact that I wasn't feeling well, I just didn't know what was wrong. So I kept going to the doctors. They couldn't find what was wrong. So I kind of went through my pregnancy very off balance. Very off balance. 1 minute I'll be okay, and the next minute I was. And that didn't mean that, because I had an IUD. So we thought it was the IUD that was, and they didn't want me to they want to terminate the pregnancy because of the IUD, because they were starting to, I went to Women's College Hospital and they told me the side effects of having an IUD while I was pregnant, you know, and it was scary stuff, and I didn't want to get rid of the child. So I went to the doctor often, frequently, just to make sure I was okay. And lo and behold, in my 6 months of pregnancy, by then my son's father, he couldn't handle it because I was stressed all the time, which made him stress. And he wasn't a person that could handle stress very well. I started noticing that about him. So our relationship deteriorated. It got really, really bad and actually very scary. And I started worrying about my baby, you know. And then one day I went to the doctor. I just wasn't feeling well. And she checked me out and she goes, well, you're very stressed. You're going to have to minimize the stress in your life. I didn't really tell them what was going on fully, right? Because, you know, I always kept everything to myself. Oh, I can fix this. I'll be okay. But then I went to the doctor. She checked me out and she said my blood pressure was really high. She was very concerned about that. And then by the time I get home, my water broke. I was 6 months pregnant. And I freaked out. So I called the ambulance and my doctor said that my water broke. And she goes, well, your water shouldn't break because you're 6 months pregnant. And I go, well, maybe it's the IUD. You know, it was still inside of me. So when my water broke, it was black like this. Yeah, and I became very frightened about why my water would be black. And then I start realizing it's the IUD that's inside of me, that it turned the water black. So they took me to Women's College Hospital, and yeah, and I had my baby there, and I'm lucky. Well, actually the baby, I didn't even get wheeled into the labor room properly. My baby came flying out. I remember the doctors running and catching him. Yeah, just before he fell. Wow. They didn't even do anything and they caught him. And I'm like, and I'm sitting there and I go, oh, that's my son, you know? Yeah, that kind of a thing. And yeah, and he was so tiny. I could fit him in the palm of my hand. And I was so, when they, like, and I start crying and I start praying to God, like, please let my baby live. And because I knew that deep inside of me that I would never be able to have another child. I just knew it. Deep inside of me, and then I accepted because I fought to hold on to that baby. And then, you know, after a few days of me coming back around and everything, and I keep going to, they wheel me down to the nursery and my baby's there in an incubator, green and purple and blue, all different colors. And it was heartening for me, you know. And I remember getting up out of the wheelchair and I put my hand in the gloves to hold my baby and I started praying. Or I started saying the Lord's Prayer over my baby because I knew it well. And I always, in my life, no matter what was happening, and especially something really weird happened to me, I always go back to God because that's what I knew. So I started praying for my son, and you know, and they basically tell me that he probably won't make it, and I'm like, no, my son is making it. And I started praying. Every day I would go and pray over him. Every time I get a chance, sometimes they would find me down in the room, going to go pray for my son, right? And then the thing that was so scary, every time I went there and all these other babies were around and they kept on dying. Every time I went, I'm like, oh, that baby is gone, that baby. And my son is there. And I'm like, okay, my son is here. And I would pray over him. And I would start, you know, like putting my hand through the incubator and pray over him and anointed him. I just did that instinctively. And then they said that I had to go home, and I start crying. I go, I don't want to leave the hospital without my baby. And they go, well, Charmaine, we have to bring the baby up to a weight where it's appropriate for you to take him home. and they had to drag me out of that hospital. I was like, cause you have no idea. When I make up my mind about something, it's like, I become totally ratchet. Like I am gone. I'm true Jamaican. I don't care, right? So, anyways, I finally got to go home, and all I can do, and I could think about my baby, and then I took care of myself. Everything. The next morning, I was gone to the hospital, but guess I was gone to the hospital with my version of St. James Bible. I've had that Bible. I still do. And I would take it out, and I went and put it beside the incubator at Psalms 23. I open up the Bible, and I leave it there. Pray over my son. And until he came out of the hospital, that's what I did. Sometimes they had to pry me and tell me to leave the hospital. And I'm like, no, I want to stay with my baby. My baby's going to go home with me. Until one day they decide, oh yeah, your baby can go home with you, you know. They told me when I could come and pick up the baby. I went to Honest Steads, and with all the money that I had, I was at Bathurst and Bloor.
Yeah.
And I bought up everything that I could for my little baby to come home. And then I got my crib. I got everything all set up, you know, in our little bachelor apartment. Mm-hmm. And the day I brought my baby home, it was the happiest day of my life. And I promised myself to God that I would take care of my son, and that's what we did. And then I kept thinking, oh, my son doesn't even have a father. And that kind of bugged me a little bit. I started crying about if I made the wrong decision of not having my son's father in his life. And it's like this good voice said to me, don't worry about it. And then I went to my doctor. I found this really great doctor. And every week, I would go and take my baby to take care, and she really liked me. She was a fantastic doctor. And she started paying attention to me. And she goes, Charmaine, you're so young and you take such good care of your baby. And I go, well, you know, I think I'm supposed to do that. And she started realizing that the father wasn't around, and she started helping me. And I told her that I lived in a basement apartment. And she goes, oh, you can't have that, you know, because your son has a little bit of asthma. And I'm like, okay, so how am I going to get out of this basement apartment? And then she told me about Toronto Community Housing. It was Metro Housing. And she helped me got an application. I filled out the application and everything. And then one day I got a phone call, not even 2-3 months later, I got a phone call saying that there's a housing available for me. They gave me 3, and the first one I went to, I really didn't like. It was near Jane Finch area. And I'm like, no, I don't like this place. And then the second one I went to was Tanridge. And I go, oh. And I met this lady who was the property manager. She was Jamaican. And she took a liking to me, and the original apartment she was going to give me, she said, no, I have another apartment I want to show you. She goes, this is going to be your home. And I went there and I look at the apartment and I saw these big windows and I go, yep, this is my home. And about a week later, I moved in. I had everything ready. I had a TV, my sofa, all my son's clothes, his crib, some baby food, and a few outfits for myself, and that's how I started. And then slowly but surely I started getting to know the neighborhood. And I really didn't like the neighborhood after I started getting the people. I'm like, what kind of people are these? You know? They were different, and I've never met people like this before. And I start paying attention to it, and I'm like, I think I want to move from here. I don't like these people. Because, you know, and they would come up to me and they go, how come you don't act like, and then my people of my own culture, they're like, you don't act like black people. And then I start going, how do black people act? I didn't know what it meant, right? And I'm a very outspoken person. I'm like, what do you mean? I go, I'm just being myself, you know? And then I started doing research. and I wanted to go back to school. I just had this urge. I wanted to go and learn. I have a child now. I need to know the rules. I need to know the rules of like the welfare system, the church system. I started thinking about, I need to know the rules and the laws in Canada. So I became obsessive about it. And then I started doing more researches, and I would talk to social workers. And I want to go back to school. But I want to go. They're asking me what grade did I go up to, and I told them. So I started over again. I went back to school. I went to Thorpe. No, first I went to a program for single mothers. It was called Focus on Change. And I went there. You could only go there for a year, and you get daycare for free. And this was at Thistletown Collegiate. And I go within walking distance. I used to just walk it up there every day. And I started learning, and I started studying, and the teachers started taking interest with me, and some of the other single mothers too. And we would go on trips, and we would have time when we sat down and we would talk, like, tell our woes or issues, and that kind of helped me to heal. And I loved those women. And then it was almost time after a year. Time went by so fast. And then they said that, oh, Charmaine, the teachers took me aside one day and they said, you could go and finish your education. And I'm like, where can I go? And they said, well, there's a school, it's an adult school at Thorpe Collegiate. And I go, okay. So I went, and they told me what to do. So I went there, found out the date for registration and everything, and I went and I did that. And I took the subject, so I started from grade 9. And in 2 years, I finished everything. From grade 9 to 12, I went to summer school. I did everything, and I don't think I ever even missed a day of school. And I would drop my son off every morning at the Elms daycare. And I tell you something, all throughout that time, I have this one thing I have to tell you guys. Every winter, when I went to drop my son off at daycare, I would fall in the same spot. Pushing my son in stroller and walking right up until the age of 10. I would fall in the same spot all the time. I could never get over it. I'm like, how come I always fell in this? I go, this is annoying. And I would go to my son, I can't wait to stop walking you here. I need to stop falling at the same spot. And I just wanted to add that little piece. It's funny. It's funny. So anyways, yeah. So I went to Thorpe Collegiate. I did really well there because I was very studious. I studied and I did all my assignment and projects, and I had to be the best. I became very competitive because they mentioned, oh, you could go to college. And I'm like, college? Somebody said college to me? And I started working really hard. And and I would take care of my son. Part of it was to show him that your education, your belief in yourself is really important. That no one can take that away from it. And you can make it whatever you want to. So I was really obsessive about that. I wanted him, because I started paying attention to where we live, there's a lot of problems. There's drug problems, there's prostitution, there's all kinds of stuff negative in the area. And I wanted to make sure my son get out of that, never to be so comfortable that he's doing those things, that you can start something no matter how hard life is and finish it. And I was so obsessed with it. I was like a mad woman, and I wanted to show him that your education, you got to start it and you got to finish it, no matter how hard it is. Even if you don't get the highest mark, start it and finish it. And that's what I did. I went to Seneca College and I did really well there. And I started studying general arts and science. And I started getting in all the topics. And then I started, the third year, I wanted to become a lawyer. And I'm in the classroom and I go, oh, So one day I was sitting there in the professors, and I kind of raised my hand. I go, so when you study law, right? I go, you can't have your own opinions. And she goes, no, Charmaine. And I go, well, I don't think this is for me then, because I have to have my opinion in everything that I do. And I don't think, and so I finished that semester, and then I went back and I started taking more general arts and science. So by the time I was done, I studied, or I amassed 56 subjects, and I studied everything. I studied political science, theology, economics, social, and I studied philosophy, humanities, all the sciences, all this, and I studied every level of psychology there was, and I amassed them. Like, I really, really studied them. And then I became a professional student. That's when I didn't even know that there was a name for it. Until the coordinator called, I got a letter. I went home from one of my classes and my mail was there. And it was a letter from my coordinator, and I looked at it and I read it, that I had to come in and see them on such and such a date, at such and such a time. And I got really nervous. And I'm like, uh-oh, I never got a letter from Seneca like this before. And I'm like, okay, so I got myself prepared and I went to my appointment. It was like 10 o'clock for the morning, and I went to see the top coordinator for that department. And he came into the room. I was sitting there waiting, and I was nervous. I mean, I was shaking and I was sweating because I couldn't figure out why they wanted to see me. And I start praying. I go, oh Lord, can you help me out here? I don't know what I did, but I think I upset Seneca College, right? I could just feel it in my bones. So he comes and he sits in and he goes, hi, Charmaine. It's nice to see you. And I go, yeah, I like to be on time. He goes, that's good. And then he opened up the computer and he goes, well, we have your records here. And I go, yes. He goes, well, this is a lot of subjects that you've studied. And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, you've been here a long time. And I go, yeah. And he goes, you did really well in your subjects. He goes, why did you study all of this? And I kind of said, I think the Lord wants me to do it, because they kept coming to me and and I keep passing them, and I kept getting student loans and grants and stuff. So I figured the Lord wanted me to study all of this. So I just kept on studying. And he goes, you're a professional student. I go, is that what it's called? He goes, yeah. He goes, well, I think it's time for you to graduate. I go, oh, you mean I can graduate now? And he's like, sweetheart, don't get smart with me, right? And I go, oh, I'm like, wow, God, that's amazing. And he goes, yeah. He goes, in the history of Seneca College, we've never experienced this. And I go, in the history? And I go, I keep making history, right? I go, I wonder what it is, And he goes, well, we're going to set you up for graduation. And out of all the students that came from Burnham Thorpe Collegiate, I was the only one who graduated. And I was so proud. Yeah. I was so proud of that. And that my son get to come and see me. I was so obsessed. And he was sitting in the front row and he got to see me graduate. He was so proud. And I remember when I took off my graduation hat, that show, Mary Tyler Moore show? Yeah. Took it off. I did that. I always wanted to do that. It was so fun. Yeah, and I had a really great time. I had a really, really great day. And I'll never forget it. And I remember when I finally got home and started praying to God. And they go, so what do you want me to do now, I amass all these subjects. I have to get a job and blah, blah, blah. And then the stress started setting in. And it wasn't like I was finished. I tried to get a job, but it was really hard because my son was sickly too, and I had to stay home a lot of the times. So I said, you know what? Even if I don't get a job, I can still volunteer. I can still do stuff, right? So I found out about Kipling Acres Nursing Home, and I went there, and I applied, and I was working there, and I met a lot of elderly people. I met the best people, and some of them told me about their past and how they used to live, and then they start to love me, and it was great. So every morning, Thursday morning, when I went to Kipling Acres in the summertime, you'll see elderly people lined up outside waiting for Charmaine to come. Then they gave me a tea program there, and I had a tea program in the mezzanine, and we would sing hymns and sing songs and just enjoy ourselves. And then it became really huge. And please don't ask me what happened there. And then I met David Miller. He was the mayor at the time, and he was telling me about his diabetes and stuff like that. He was a really nice man. He was really nice. And by then I started not feeling well too, and then eventually though, I got sick. I didn't know what it was. I went to the doctor, and they say, oh, you have the stomach flu. You can go home and take this and take that. So I went home, and then a few hours later, I collapsed. I was trying to run to the telephone to go call 911 because I went in the mirror and I didn't recognize myself. And I started going, oh my God, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I'm like, who is that? And I started freaking out. So I run from the bathroom into the living room because my telephone was in the living room. And I went to go grab the phone, and next thing I heard this bang on the floor. And I'm thinking to myself, what is that? And I realized it's me, and I couldn't move. And I was trying to move, and I couldn't move. And I got really more frightened, so I started praying. And I go, God, you better not come and let my son be dead, find me dead here, or you and we're gonna go to war. I remember it specifically. And I said, I go, my life isn't over yet. You made me study all that stuff. And I go, I'm not ready yet. I go, you gotta help me. Let my son come home. Let my son come home. And then I passed out. And then I was laying in front I would go in and out of consciousness. Every time I opened my eye, I kept seeing the clock. There was a clock above my entertainment center. I always keep a clock there. And I kept saying, oh my God, that's the time. And I keep looking at it, and I kept passing out. And I go, please, Lord, and I swear, I heard, I don't know what it was. And I felt like God was there. And I kept going, you better not leave me. I go, you can't leave me. You can't make me go through all this stuff my whole life, and then you're gonna make my teenage son come and find me dead. I go, you better not go anywhere. And I started cursing at him. I go, I am not ready to go anywhere. I want to raise my son. I want to finish what I start. And then all of a sudden, I hear this voice went, Mom! And I went to God and I go, okay, I get it now. And I go, thank you, Lord. I go, my life goes to you as of that day. And I crashed, only to wake up in the hospital. I was in the hospital for a month in diabetic coma. I had no idea I had diabetes, and that my whole life that I had it. After all the information they acquired about me, I apparently had juvenile diabetes. And I go, all my life I've been carrying around water, couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Nobody could figure it out, but I got obsessed with fitness and carrying water. From I was young, I was always carrying a bottle of water with me. And I remember a rabbi came to see me, and he told me that as long as I live, I must always have water. He goes, water saved your life. And you know, that experience itself, I turned my life over to God. and I never went back on my word with him. Whatever I could, I became so obligated. I felt old, but then I start realizing that yes, I can give my life to God, but I must also learn to love myself so I can extend it to others. I think that's what God wants us to do. There's nothing wrong with loving yourself first and then be able to extend it to other people. And this way you can love them better, you can listen to them better, you can share better with them. But I mean, like, I've glossed over a lot of stuff, but God has always been in my life, and he always magnifies everything that he does for me. And sometimes something unusual would happen to me, and I'm like, that was you, wasn't it? And I knew it intrinsically, even though sometimes, you know, you fall off and you don't have the same kind of faith, and you get a little confused and you get disappointed. And then I remember this one pastor said to me that, remember this, God doesn't do things in your time, he does it in his. And even if you don't see that it's happening immediately, you know that he's behind the scene making it even better for you. And he does. And you see it. I mean, some people won't believe you, but you know when something changed. And even if you don't agree with what it is the change, it's always for the good, and it's always for the better. So in all of that came out the fact that I became the tenant representative of my community, and I helped a lot of people. I helped them. Anybody came to me, I did whatever I could to help them, advocate for their maintenance issue, even for personal stuff. I would find out information and give it to them. And now, this past year, they made me the community leader. And that comes with a whole bunch of other issues. But I try to help each other, people, and whatever negative things is happening, I kind of like, okay, that's happening. That's not about me. But whoever comes to me and who is receptive to my help, I help them and I pray for them. I also am an usher at my church, Rexdale Alliance. I'm a greeter, and I like to help after we have fellowship, and I help in that area too and pray with people. I run into Don, who has assisted me in a lot of things, and he's helping me in my community now too. So trust God. He is there and he is real. Do not let anybody tell you that God is not real. He's inside of us. He loves us, and he wants us to love one another and to share with each other.